Welcome to My Life, Tanya Applied, with Rabbi Simon Jacobson, a journey into the deepest teachings of Torah and their application to our personal, emotional, and psychological lives.
A good Tavach, a good week. We continue our journey in the life-changing Sefer HaTanya. This program is made possible by Rena Lights LLC, and it's in honor and memory of Rabbi Yosef Halevi Weinberg Olav Shalom, Rabbi Moshe Pinchas HaKoyen Katz Olav Shalom, and Rabbi Yoel HaKoyen Khan Olav Shalom. It's also in schus and merit of Rabbi Zev Yecheskel HaKoyen and Risha Katz Le'erich Yomim V'Shanim Tevis for many long, healthy years. So, middle of chapter 13, Perek Yud Gimel, and what we've learned so far is this paradox of the Beinoni, which is the core Sefer HaTanya, Sefer Shel Beinim, that on one hand, the faculties of the divine soul and the animal soul are active. Obviously, there are measures of how active, during davening, after davening, as we've learned. But the self-control of the Beinoni dominates, and therefore the divine soul controls the thought, speech, and action. So expression, governance, who controls the person? In the Beinoni, it's the divine soul, but the animal soul is active. And as such, we understand, as he began chapter 13, the Maimon Chazal, Zev Zeh Sheftim, that the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara both are like Sheftim. They're like judges, not moishlan. They don't control. They're judges that state their opinion. And then comes the third judge, the Eibishter. Like he said, Yamid li min evyan le'shiyah meshefte nafshe. So when you have the two opinions of the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, each one wanting their opinion to dominate, comes the halacha kedivri machriya. And who is that? That is the Eibishter, like he puts in the words of the Alter Rebbe here, Hu HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ezrei La Yetzer Tov. He supports the Yetzer Tov, but there's an effort coming on the person's behalf. It's not that Hashem, the third judge, is controlling it. It's coming from the divine soul, and the divine soul is exerting himself. And he has the powers like we learned. He has the Moach Shal Ta'alev. He has the natural capacity of self-control. He has the support of his ava, his deeper love within him. If it's after davening, it's also the effect of davening, all the effects. But he has now the additional to finally make the machriya, to determine who's going to run the show, so to speak. He has the Kadosh Baruch Hu Ezrei, which is the power that both, as we explained, that comes. That the divine light is shining on the divine soul. To have Lislan Yisra and Vishlita al Sichlus Achsiv Yetzer Hara, that it should have that dominance over the foolishness of the Yetzer Hara, of the evil inclination. Ki Yisraner min HaCheshach, like the dominance of light over darkness. As we explained both ways, the person does his part, which is also a power that was given to him naturally, B'tel Doseh, the self-control of Moach Shal Ta'alev. But in addition to that, when you do your part, you also have the Eibishter. So in addition to having the natural, which also comes from God, is the additional aspect of this third judge that helps be machriya. And therefore, what happens is, the garments, the irktana, ze'aguf, the body, and its faculties and its thought, speech, and action, the expression of thought, speech, and action are controlled by the faculties of the divine soul. So someone wrote a question, what's the diuk of the word when you see miyad? He says, the Yetzer Hara says its opinion in the left side of the heart. That's the impulsive heart at work. The subjective, impulsive interest, self-interest of the animal soul, which is in the heart. Says the Alter Rebbe, like we learned in chapter 9. And from the heart, it rises to the mind. It affects the mind, just like the blood of the heart sustains the brain. the emotions want to affect the mind. But then, umiyad chelikol hashefet hasheni. But immediately, it says miyad, the second judge disagrees. Shehu nefesh halikish shebemeach. Nefesh halikish, which resides in the mind, disagrees with the impulse that's trying to affect the mind. And that mind of the divine soul, which rests in the mind, mispasha, that extends to the right side of the heart. So that opposes. So the question was asked, what is the word miyad? Why miyad? So the truth is, I alluded to the explanation of it in the last class and also now. And what's the word? Though I can't say it says that explicitly, but what it appears to be the pshat is because it's critical to miyad. The Alter Rebbe could have written not necessarily immediately, because the question remains: if indeed God has always taken the side of the divine soul, so why is it that we sometimes succumb to our animal soul? You should always have the animal soul. The divine soul counters it, and God 2 against 1. Halacha kediv machil, like in a court case, 2 judges against 1. The ruling is for the divine soul. The answer is because you have to allow the divine soul to speak. Because the impulses of the heart, its power is to get you to act immediately. Most of our mistakes, if not all, happen because we don't allow the divine soul to speak. It's like a court case, only have a prosecutor. You don't have the defense. You don't have the other opinion. That's why he says miyad. Because if it's not miyad, the animal soul's impulse can affect the mind, and by the time the divine soul is allowed to speak, you've already acted, God forbid, or spoken, or thought something inappropriate, willfully. So the miyad is critical, but because you see here, it's not just the divine soul is speaking up. It immediately counters the animal soul. It immediately counters the Yetzer Hara. So the example with the kings, when the animal soul, the king, rises and tries to oppose and wants to control the city, the king, the divine soul, which is the other king, can't say, you know what, I'll wait till tomorrow or the next day. Miyad. You have to immediately rise to the occasion, because even one battle can be lost because you want to be a Beinoni. So that's why the miyad, immediate. The Rebbe adds that miyad is not just referring to miyad, that the Shevet Hasheni, the second judge, is disagreeing and stating the opinion of the divine soul, but miyad also goes on HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ezrei, and the whole Hemshech, the continuation, that Ezrei is also miyad. So as soon as the divine soul opposes the animal soul, or the Yetzer Tov opposes the Yetzer Hara, miyad also goes on that the Eibishter immediately helps. And that's why you basically nip it in the bud and don't allow the emotional impulse that wants you to get you to act immediately. I may have mentioned the word of the Razah, the older brother of the Rebbe Rashab. He said once that whenever you have a thought, you get angry or you're upset about something or whatever, emotional, don't act on it right away. Wait. I think it says, wait 18 hours, or wait overnight, or wait time. Why? Because the power of the moment, in the throes of an emotional reaction, is when we get consumed, we get obsessed. When you wait, it subsides like a fire. It subsides, the passion of the moment gets weaker. So the quicker you nip it in the bud, the power of the animal soul lies primarily because it's impulsive. What is impulsive? Act now. Don't wait. You want it now. You have a desire, a temptation. Act. So that helps explain the miyad. Now, however, at the end of the piece that we learned last week was, but because even though, so we have the 2 against 1, we have the HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ezrei, God is helping the divine soul, the Yetzer Tov, to prevail, and therefore the thought, speech, and action of the person are under control. But nevertheless, being that the negative energy in the left side of the heart has not been destroyed, it's been controlled, it's been subdued, it's been so-called suppressed, but it's still there. It just doesn't have control over the person's thought, speech, and action. That's why he's called Kirosha, Kemoy Rosha, the Beinoni. Because as far as the faculties go, he's like a Rosha. But it doesn't say Rosha. Loi Rosha Mamish. El sheyachzik atzmei lebeini. And that's what Razal say. Afilu kol ha'olam kuli eimel chatzadikata hoye beinecha kirosha. To be that type of self-appraisal should be honest. No. That it's not just what you are, how you act or how you speak or how you think. It's also what's burning inside you. What is part of your character to keep vigilant and understand yourself well. So the Chazal is saying, the Elam people could be saying, hey, look, the person is perfect in thought, speech, and action. Don't accept that. Because inside of you, there's the animal soul is active, even if it's not expressing itself. So So it's an awareness what's going on within you. So it's not just driven by the external expression, even though thought, speech, and action are vital. Same thing with speech and action, with speech and thought. But it's telling us the advice as we discussed in the last class. The Nefesh Habam is the animal soul gets stronger the more you use, the more you eat and drink, and so on. And that's where we stopped last year. Now comes the next section. Again, seeing the thoroughness of the Alter Rebbe. And as a preface, before we continue, okay, fine. But aren't there people who indeed don't have that temptation within them? So can you say this about everybody? There are a lot of people. There are people who know they have temptation. They're challenged. But they control it, and the Eibishter helps them. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ezrei. And we know there are different levels in Beinanim. So the Alter Rebbe is going to cover now a level, even a person who is even more in control than a regular Beinani. Still a Beinani also says this, because the Gemara doesn't make an exception. The Gemara doesn't say only certain types of people. It says, Afilu kol ha'olam kuli eimel chatzadikata. Know that you have that Yetzer Hara. What happens if you actually do know that you don't have the Yetzer Hara, is not really tempting you? So Alter Rebbe now continues to explain how intense and how critical a person has to know about themselves. So he goes on to say like this: Va'af mi, and even a person, shebeteres Hashem, Chavtzei, v'yoga b'yemim v'layla. So even a person for whom God's Torah is his delight. Chavtzei is from the word delight, chayfetz. V'yoga b'yemim v'layla, l'shma. And he studies it day and night, l'shma, for God's sake. Not for any other purpose. Not for any ulterior motive. For God's sake. Now this pasuk, this expression, Teres Hashem Cheftzei, V'yoga b'yem v'layla, is based on Tilim, right? In the beginning, the second pasuk in Tilim, Aleph Beis, 1-2. But he adds l'shma, the Alter Rebbe. So he's doing it for God's sake. So you would think a person like that, we're talking about his, not only is his thought, speech, and action under control, his desire, his pleasure is learning Torah. And more than that, it's not just his pleasure, he does it day and night. So you could say, okay, why shouldn't he see himself like a tzaddik? So if people tell him that you're like a tzaddik, afilu kol ha'olam kuli eimel chatzadikata, learning Torah day and night. Now this is critical because we're going to go back to Rabbah, who says, Beinani kamo yanor. And Rabbah, of course, was in the highest category possible. So the Alter Rebbe says that even though this is the case, nevertheless, he should not consider himself a tzaddik. He should still consider himself kedosha, like a Beinani. Now, so he says, Ein zu heichacha klal, that even though his desire is, and pleasure is learning Torah. It's his delight and desire. And he learns Torah day and night. He's exerting himself in Torah day and night. Ein zo echacha klal. It's no proof whatsoever that the evil has been removed, nitche, or dislodged, or pushed aside from its place in the animal soul. It's possible that the very core, the Mehusi v'atzmusi of the Ra, or you can say of the animal soul, is betokfe, is with full intensity, or intensity, b'gvorose, and full strength, b'mkeme b'chol hasmoli, in its place, in the left side, the left chamber of the heart. So all strength and power is still there. It's not tempting him, perhaps, because he's completely occupied with learning Torah, but it's still there. So there's a Beini where it could be tempting him, but then he controls it and and represses it, or suppresses it. Here, he's learning Torah day and night, and he's completely consumed with that. But still, his Yetzer Hara was not destroyed. So then what? Yes. Rak shalavushav shehem machshove, dibur maisa, his garments. It's only that his garments of thought, speech, and action, shel hanefesh habamis, from the animal soul, eino mislapshin b'moyach hapeh, b'moyach v'hapeh v'yadayim v'shar ivri haguf. They have no influence, meaning they're not alavush, they're not serving as an expression or a garment over his brain, mouth, and hands, and other parts of his body. Because remember, there's two things in the Nefesh Habamis, as we learned earlier. Like with the Nefesh Lakiz, there's faculties, that's brain, mouth, and hands, and other parts of the body, of the small city called the body. But then there's the expression of it, which means where it's actually controlling thought, speech, and action. So thought, speech, and action are not activated and serving the mind or the brain, the mouth and hands and other parts of the body under the control of the animal soul. That's not happening. Because God has allowed, who gave him, like we said before, what is this? Hashem Ezrei, God gave him shlita, control of the mind and dominance, and control and dominance of the mind over the heart, over the emotions. So therefore it doesn't allow the faculties of the animal soul and so-called the body part to express itself in thought, speech, and action. Ulachei nefesh alakis, the Alter Rebbe is going back to just give us the full picture, and that's why ulachei nefesh alakis, therefore, the divine soul, shebemoyach meishelas be'iktano, the divine soul in his brain dominates the small city, which refers to Evrei Haguf Kulam. Like we learned, Irktan is Haguf is the body, and the citizens of that small city are the limbs, are the parts of the body. So instead of the animal soul controlling through its garments, it's the divine soul that's controlling through the garments. Evrei Haguf Kulam, all the parts of the body, so they become a garment and vehicle to whom? To channel the three garments of the divine soul. So the divine faculties are manifesting the garments of expression of thought, speech, and action are divine, which is the thought, speech, and action of the 613 mitzvahs in the Torah, commandments in the Torah. So though he said this earlier, but he wants to, besides refresh us, but he wants to give us the whole picture here. So therefore, we still haven't concluded. But he's learning Torah all day. His desire, his pleasure, delight is in Torah. He's exerting and learning himself in Torah, in learning Torah day and night. However, all this is still a form of expression in garments. That the divine soul is controlling the garments. Avol. Going back to the same language he used in chapter 12. The deep core and essence of the divine soul in the Beinani. Ein lo shlita memshala al mehusa v'atzmusa shel nefesh habam is bebeinani. Does not have control or dominance over the etzem muhus, the core and essence of the animal soul. So as we discussed in chapter 12, there's the etzem of something and there's this hispashtus. The etzem is the core entity. Hispashtus is his expression. In this case, hispashtus' expression is through the garments. The core entity is the very entity. And it's critical to understand when we self-analyze. Introspection is to know, yes, you get tremendous credit and it's critical, important that your expression be refined, but you have to also know what are the driving forces inside you. And the Alter Rebbe is talking now about the drive, the voice of the animal soul is fully active. Even in this person who's learning Torah day and night. Ki'im b'shah sha'avas Hashem hu b'izgalus libi. He goes again to qualify, but as we know, there are times, even in the Beinani, where even the faculties silence, the divine faculties silence the animal faculties, and that's a time when the love for Hashem, only the time, the exception time, there's an exception, when his love for God, who bizgalus libe, is manifest in a revealed and open way in his heart, at specific times, such as during prayer and similar. Which is even stronger than just controlling expression. That in a sense, it's completely repressing even the faculties. And this we learned in chapter 12. Spoke at length about during time of davening, relatively at length. So what's that, etc.? Well, you could say, firstly, includes learning during learning Torah, or other times. On Yom Kippur, for example, a Shabbos, Yom Tov, a person's in a very inspired state. There are times when you have that type of control. Meaning also over the faculties. So the Alter Rebbe is giving that exception. Fa'av gam zeis hapam, the Alter Rebbe now adds. And even in this case, where he's controlling even the faculties of the animal soul, suppressing them, it's still only a overpowering control and dominance. You haven't changed the animal soul. So there are situations where the animal soul is speaking, and who's governing, who actually comes out in expression of governing, that is the divine soul and its faculties and garments. But there are situations where the faculties are completely repressed, but you have not changed the animal soul, as the Alter Rebbe spoke about earlier. Kediksiv, like it says, Ulu'um ulum yemot. This goes back to expression to the verse that he brought in chapter 9. One nation shall overpower the other nation. From Pasha Vayetze, Yaakov and Esav. So when you say lum yemutz, overpower, tells you it's not transformed, you're overpowering it. Even during davening, even during those itum uzumonim that he said, those special times where you completely can repress the animal soul. Kishazeh comes and nefel, kishazeh come. As Rashi says there, when one rises, the other one falls, and when the other one rises, he says chulu, which means the first one falls. So you see clearly from there that it's not a transformation, it's a constant battle. The only thing is, you're controlling it. The question is, to what extent? Only the garments or also the faculties for that time being? Shenefesh alikis misametzes umizgaberes al nefesh abamis, that the divine soul overpowers and gains strength over the animal soul. And we're talking now during davening and during those special times where you have even more power, because it's an Eis Ratzon, Meichen de Gadlus, like he said in chapter 12. Bimkeira gvura shehi bina. So Alter Rebbe is adding more now. Where is it getting this power from? It's drawing from the source of gvuras. Gvura is the idea of power, discipline, restraint, which is the power of bina, cognition, bina. The mokar of gvuras. In other words, this is like an overpowering surge. Thinking about the battle between the two kings, there are times where the one king is fighting with a certain amount of strength, but then there's a special surge of energy, which is now drawing from much deeper strength. It's like when a person exerts themselves. That's what he's talking about. And when a person, so it's still coming from an overpowering strength of this gvura. And Alter Rebbe is going to continue to explain even when then there's an overpowering element, Lizbainin b'gdulas Hashem. And how does that happen? Because he's contemplating on the greatness of God. Ein Sof Baruch Hu. On the greatness of God, the blessed infinite one. And not just his banus, but Olahelid Ava Azal Hashem Kirish Be'esh B'chala Yimani Shebelivi. And it gives birth to a powerful, intense love, like flaming fire for God in the person's right chamber of the heart. Then the sitracha, the other side of the animal soul, has been subdued. But with all that, even during davening now, it's not completely eliminated. As he's going to go on to explain. And that's why even a person like that is learning all day and night, and even a time during davening when everything is the most powerful possible way that a person can dominate, the animal soul has not been eliminated. And that's why Yir Beinecha Karosha, as the Alter Rebbe will continue to explain as we go further. So indeed, the Alter Rebbe is coming back and bringing the whole themes of chapter 12 into chapter 13 to explain the Maimoreh Chazal that he began in the beginning of Tanya. But we'll go over that in the next year, in the next class. Okay, we'll stop here. Everyone have a good tavach. Go to TanyaApplied.com, where you can find this and all the previous programs, and submit any questions that you may have. Be well. Kol Tov.
This has been My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Please join us again next week. Visit ChasidusApplied.com for archived classes and more resources.